The Celebration Bowl has been moved up a week, which now puts it on the same day as the Army versus Navy game. A lot of people have expressed the outrage around this scheduling overlap, especially sports media personality Stugatz, who I believe has a tad bit of misguided anger. Oh yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music. That was bad.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. I can promise you there will be no singing on the Twitter. You got to be able to laugh at yourself. And boy, I feel like I cracked bad in that note. But that's all right, because today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We'll wrap up today's episode with why I believe that A'ja Wilson's stardom and her history would make her a very strong pairing with HBCU women's basketball. Prior to that, Lincoln men's basketball has been caught up in a really bad cover-up, and them coming clean kind of makes me know why they wanted to have this hidden in the first place. But let's kick off today's episode because Stugatz is upset about the Celebration Bowl and the Army versus Navy game overlapping. But to me, his anger is a tad bit misplaced. Now, you may not know who Stugatz is. You may know his more well-known partner, at least from my point of view, the more well-known partner, and that's Dan Le Batard. He was on ESPN, but you got Stugatz with him. So here's the thing. Here is the thing. I understand why he is upset. I do not criticize him for being upset. One thing I do criticize is the way that he expressed his anger, and then also who his anger is directed at, because I do not believe that it's directed at the correct person. I don't want to blemish or put smoke in front of his words, so I want to give them to you before I start talking about them so that you can kind of form your own thought process without what I said clouding it, right? So this is what Stugatz says. College football does not care about our military. They do not care about our troops. This game has been an isolated game, Army versus Navy. In those two schools, the troops, they deserve to have a weekend that is all about them. I stopped there because that is really what his frustration is. I don't believe that he's against the Celebration Bowl. I do not believe that. So I stopped there. Now let's get into the point where I feel like it's a tad bit of misguided anger, getting to the point where I feel like it's offensive. I feel like he's disrespectful and disregarding HBCU football and really just it's another game, but really mostly all football. That's not that. Not that Army versus Navy game. This is what he said. They took this isolated game, this beautiful game, and you know what they did? Now you get the Camellia Bowl and you get the Celebration Bowl. That is a disgrace, and I'll tell you why. Go ahead. Name any team who's played in the last 10 of any of those bowls. The answer is you can't. I guarantee you can't. I guarantee you can tell me who's playing in the Army-Navy game. That was an ignorant end to his point. That was ignorant. You're telling me that I can tell you who's in Army versus Navy because it's Army and Navy. It's in the freaking title. That's like telling me I bet you can tell me who played in the FAMU versus Alabama State game every year. Yes, because I know you just told me who played in it, right? Like that's not the same thing as a game that has a revolving door of opponents. Like that was a very ignorant take. Secondly, on the layer of ignorance, in my opinion, is if you're speaking to Dan Le Batard, maybe he doesn't know who's in the Celebration Bowl because maybe he does not follow HBCU football. So if you're speaking directly to him, I can give you that. But to say that nobody that's listening to you can name anybody who was in the last 10 Celebration Bowls, I believe it's unfair. I do. And I believe that it speaks from a place of ignorance and a place of just not paying attention, that level of ignorance. Like, you don't know. I do not believe that Stugotz is against the Celebration Bowl. I believe that he is against the scheduling of it in 2024 and likely moving forward in the long-term future. This is what it's going to be. I believe that he is against that. But is he against the idea of HBCUs having their own Super Bowl? I don't believe so. What I believe is he doesn't care. It's not, he could care either way. Like, if this was still the third Saturday, that man's not watching it. That man couldn't care less. This may have been the first time that he's heard of the Celebration Bowl. So that's where he is. But I feel like there's a retraction necessary there, because that is disrespectful. To disregard this event is disrespectful. Because I can tell you what, everything that you're going to say, Stugotz, everything that I'm going to say, not everything, but for the most part, the principle of what we're saying, I think there's a mirror here. I don't disrespect your tradition. But if you want to sit here and tell me that I don't know or you don't know, and nobody can tell you the last 10 opponents or any of the last 10 opponents in the Celebration Bowl, I don't agree with that. But I'll tell you what, I can't tell you the outcome of the last 10 Army versus Navy games. The only reason I looked up who had won the article I had read told me who won the last 2 games. I read that article earlier today. I already forgot. And I don't say that to be disrespectful. I say that in the sense that everybody does not have the same priorities. See, you may not care to watch the Celebration Bowl. I don't really care to watch Army versus Navy. I appreciate what it is. My folks served. Like, I respect the troops. But I'm not watching the game because of that. So I want to be careful, because I believe that the end of what he said is disrespectful. You can be pro Army versus Navy without being anti anything else. But unfortunately, he didn't show the ability to do that. He didn't show the ability to just praise what he's fighting for. He had to fight against something. He had to disrespect something. Now, I don't know nothing about the Camellia Bowl. I don't. But I'm not about to disrespect it. I just don't know about it. And I can admit that I don't know about it because it's not about me. That's not for me. Right? And here's my thing. Your real enemy is the college football playoffs. The expansion of that is the reason that the Celebration Bowl had to move. I will not disrespect everybody who's like, dang, I wish that this was still standalone, because I understand that. Folks have traditions. I respect your traditions, and I respect your desire to stay true to those traditions. So if anybody else feels disrespected, I'm sorry. If Stugotz feels disrespected by this, I feel like I approach this with the appropriate energy. I don't disrespect the Navy. I don't disrespect the Army. But what I do say is our traditions have equal value to this group. Kicking off bowl season is important to HBCUs. It's important to the Celebration Bowl. And you got to take care of yourself first. I'm sorry that it infringed upon Army versus Navy. But I'll tell you what, I also don't necessarily know if it's going to have the negative impact that Stugotz believes that it'll have, unless it's just simply scheduling, period. But the same amount of eyes are going to tune in. I think so. I don't know how many casual fans are just saying, let me click over to Army versus Navy. I don't know how many casual fans are saying, let's click over to the HBCU Celebration Bowl. I don't know. I genuinely do not know. I believe that both of these games are targeted demographics, right? Like, you're targeting a certain group of people with the Celebration Bowl. You're targeting a certain group of people when it comes to the Army versus Navy. And then you'll get some people like, oh, football's on, there's nothing else on for the Army versus Navy. That's just my personal opinion on what I've seen. I believe that the high stakes of the Celebration Bowl gives this one a little bit more gusto, but I'm also jaded, right? Like, I went to an HBCU. My point of view on this is different. My frame of reference makes me feel differently about the Celebration Bowl than I would about Army versus Navy. Because you know what? Somebody who served may say, nah, that was it for me. Like that, the same way you feel about the Celebration Bowl as a Texas Southern alum or as a FAMU alum, let's use somebody who's actually been in that game and has won that game. The same way you feel about the Celebration Bowl as a FAMU alum is probably the same way that somebody who served feels about Army versus Navy. It's special to them. And I won't disrespect what's special to them. But unfortunately, we had to do what we had to do. And we got to put ourselves first, Lucius. That's just how it goes. And with that, putting ourselves first, we have to move it up a week. I also don't think it's going to be that big of a deal because it's only going to be like a quarter of overlap. It's 2 hours away. You'll have some of the third quarter and the fourth quarter. I don't believe that in the Celebration Bowl does come up first. I don't believe that that quarter and a half-ish or whatever is going to put that much of a dent into the ratings. It's not going to put a dent into the people who actually were going to go. I can guarantee you the people who are going to go to either event are not going to decide not to because Army versus Navy comes on that day or because the Celebration Bowl comes on that day. I understand that standing alone is important, and I give credence to that. That's the last time I'm going to give credence to it because I've said it repeatedly, and I want to make sure that it's clear, but I think it should be by now. I give credence to it. It's not the end-all, be-all. I respect your desire for it, but nah, I ain't settling for that disrespect. That's me personally. Now, as we push forward, speaking of disrespect, I believe that Jason Armstrong was disrespected by Lincoln men's basketball. The way that he departed from the university after the success that he just gave the school, it's been revealed to be a nasty cover-up by Lincoln, and let's get into that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. If you want to go get yourself a Stanley Cup seat, you want to go get yourself a NBA Finals seat, maybe you want to go get yourself an MLB seat. All of these games are here, even if it's not sports. Maybe it's just comedy. Maybe it's the theater. Whatever it could be, you can find it on Gametime. All you have to do is crack open the Gametime app. Make sure that you've already downloaded it, of course, and created an account. And then once you use that account for your first purchase, use Locked On College. Put that one on me, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. That is Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. Doesn't matter if it's athletics. Doesn't matter if it's entertainment or anything in between. They have the best deals, not only at a low initial price, but then you also get things like flash deals, priority deals to make a good price even better. So go ahead, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day sports network on YouTube. So go ahead and go to Locked On Sports Today and subscribe. Now, I feel like Lincoln men's basketball just got caught up in a terrible cover-up with how they let go of Jason Armstrong. That is their former men's basketball coach, who they previously said that they did not let go. Let me read you this headline. Lincoln men's basketball wins their first ever CIAA championship and fires their head coach mere weeks later. Y'all hear me? Y'all hear me? Let's read this again. Lincoln men's basketball wins their first ever in school history, first ever. Lincoln men's basketball wins their first ever CIAA championship. And just mere months later, they have fired their head coach. Don't that sound strange? Don't that sound like BS? Don't that sound like something you would be a little bit curious about? Why would they do that? I know it does. And that's the reason they lied about it. That's the reason they tried to cover up what really happened. And now, because they've revealed that it was a cover up, now there's even more questions, and I want to know what was the reason for the cover-up. I want to know why did you reveal it now. I have a lot of things I'm curious about when it comes to Lincoln men's basketball because Lincoln didn't want to run with the story that they fired this coach. Not even a season later. I'm talking about he won the championship before the next season started. They fired him. They didn't want to run with that story, but unfortunately, it was not believed when they said Jason Armstrong voluntarily stepped down. He voluntarily resigned. That's what they said when it first happened. But now they released this statement. In the weeks since Jason Armstrong's departure, as Lincoln University's men's basketball coach, questions have arisen about the nature of his departure. The university retracts its earlier statement that Coach Armstrong voluntarily resigned. His departure was a decision by the university to end his employment. The university thanks Coach Armstrong for his dedication in leading the team to its first CIAA basketball title and raising academic standards for his players. We wish him the best in his coaching career. All right, you're going to say all of that normal stuff afterwards. Let's focus on the top half. The university retracts its earlier statement that Coach Armstrong voluntarily resigned. His departure was a decision by the university to end his employment. They fired the man. and told everybody else that he resigned. Now, I've seen that happen before. Don't get it twisted. They've gone in, hey, you're going to go. This is how the meeting usually goes. Hey, Coach Armstrong, we're going to get rid of you. But we want to give you the option to stand or to step down. It'll look better on you, look better on everybody. It'll look peaceful, right? That's how that conversation typically goes. But you're not having that, we're going to fire you, but we need you to step down. You're not having that conversation with somebody who just won a championship, let alone the first championship in school history. That's bullcrap. Let's just keep it real. All right, let's just call it what it is. That's some BS. All right. Now, what it sounds like is that nobody was buying it initially anyway. Sounds like nobody. Why would he step down? Why would he do that? So now you're getting questions. And now you're getting questions. You're getting questions. So why now? I can clearly tell why you covered it up, because you knew it would look bad. You knew that's not a pretty headline that you want to really rock with. But why now do you come clean? Why now do you tell me that he didn't resign? He got fired. Because if you ask me, you're supposed to stick to that lie. So something must change. And I guarantee you it was not the university growing a conscience. I guarantee you it wasn't the university saying, I just can't sleep at night knowing what we did to Jason Armstrong. We got to tell somebody we fired him. I don't believe that that's what happened. I believe that either Jason Armstrong was about to come out to talk. Maybe they got wind of an interview that's coming out. I'll be looking for it. If Jason Armstrong has an interview coming out, he will reveal some stuff on why he got fired, on what happened. And from what I hear, I put some feelers out. From what I hear, it's not anything that he did wrong. When you have a controversy, a lot of times you want to cover it up for somebody. A coach winning a championship and then resigning when you know he was really fired, right? Like, he was fired or resigned. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but basically the cover up, this type of cover up typically happens when you have some sort of controversy around the coach. From what I hear, that's not what happened. From what I hear, that's not what happened. What happened is they ain't like him. They ain't fooled with Coach Armstrong. And that's juvenile. That genuinely is. To sit here and say, we don't like this guy, we're going to get him out of here after you won a championship, is crap. And he had a pretty good interim season the year prior. So then in his first year as an official head coach, he won the championship. That's a championship appearance and a championship victory in his first 2 years. One as an interim head coach and one as the full-time official head coach. They say that winning cures everything, but it didn't cure this. It didn't cure this, man. Maybe somebody's getting, when you say questions are happening, maybe people are doing investigations and the truth was close to coming out. So you say, you know what, let me go ahead and get ahead of it and let me say we fired them. I don't know. What I do know is that this is disappointing. What I do know is that I'm not embarrassed, but this is embarrassing for Lincoln to me. Because it really does put a stain on you. It almost puts worse of a stain, right? Like, Lincoln didn't want to come out and say that they fired Lincoln didn't want to come out and say that they fired Jason Armstrong right after the season because he had just won a championship and they understood that would look bad. It would lead to a lot of questions. Unfortunately, the question still came when they said that he voluntarily resigned. So now a little bit later, you say, nah, he didn't resign. Got to come clean with y'all. We fired him. I think you look worse now because what did you lie for? Likely because you knew the headlines, but what if it's something a little bit worse than that? What if it's something a little bit worse than that? It makes me wonder what was really going on. And I don't have all of the facts, but the things that I do have, it tells me that Jason Armstrong wasn't out here getting into trouble. That voluntary resignation was not to benefit him. It was to benefit the school. And that looks bad. That's ugly. Now, as we push forward, I want to grow, man. I want to grow the game of HBCU women's basketball. And I believe that Asia Wilson, Las Vegas Aces star, face of the WNBA, would be a perfect person to do it. And she has some roots that makes it make sense on why she would actually try. And let's explore all of that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Asia Wilson will be a great figure to partner with HBCU women's basketball. Now, let's just be clear. Asia Wilson will be a great figure to partner with anything basketball, men, women, high school, college, pro, middle school, AAU. This is a star. But I'm specifying it to HBCUs because I believe that she has some roots that would make this a logical pairing, and this is locked on HBCU. So obviously, I'm leaning towards her wanting to do this. Let's get into the foundation. Let's get into the fact that she has a template already, and that stems from Chris Paul. It's actually the only reason that I'm thinking about this. Nothing Asia Wilson has said, nothing anybody else has said about Asia Wilson has made me think that this was about to happen. This is just me saying I would like it to happen. If it doesn't, I'm not looking at it no differently. I'm not requesting or demanding, I should say. I'm not demanding her to do this. I'm not saying that it's her obligation or that it's what she should do. Just saying it would be nice if she does it. And I think it would make a little bit of sense. Let's look at that template. Chris Paul has a strong partnership rolling with HBCUs, and I believe that Asia Wilson could have a very similar thing, but with the women's game, because CP3's tip-off, CP3's HBCU challenge, it's all about the men's game. And listen, I'll get to those criteria in a second. Like I said, I've been heavy on this for a minute, though. I've kind of been heavy on the idea that as you're trying to grow HBCU basketball, it should not be a gender-specific thing. We should not dedicate so many resources only to growing HBCU men's basketball. I think that college women's basketball specifically is on such an incline right now. And it's moved over to the W. But I think that college women's basketball is on such an incline that using that hype with HBCU women's basketball would be a really good partnership. And I believe that if there was a chance to take or time to take a chance, it would be right now. And I understand that for many, it does look like a chance. But you could do what CP3 is doing. You genuinely could. He's been doing the HBCU tip-off, the HBCU challenge. He's been partnering with D2 and D1 HBCUs, giving us games against HBCU versus HBCUs that we wouldn't have necessarily gotten without that. Right? Like, I don't know if I would have seen North Carolina A&T versus Texas Southern. I don't know if I see A&T versus Howard. Like these are games that I'm not necessarily sure I would have seen, but they came together in an HBCU event. So, of course, I like that part. That is a really dope aspect of it. But then on the other hand, excuse me, it's also putting a spotlight on HBCU basketball. It's putting them in games that other people might not have cared in the middle of what was that, like December, November? Like, people might not have cared about those specific games that you typically would have played, because instead of playing North Carolina A&T, maybe you play the University of North Carolina, and people ain't checking for that so much. So I believe that this has put a spotlight on it, and I enjoy everything that it represents. And earlier, it brought, I don't think they did this last year, but earlier in the series, he would bring these games to Phoenix where HBCUs aren't. So now it's a marketing ploy, not only for HBCU athletics, but then also for HBCU academics to be able to reach out and recruit academic students, not just student athletes. I look at that and I believe that you could do that same thing with Asia Wilson. I look at that and I say, you could do it in Vegas. You could move this game or that game, have that game. I shouldn't say move it because it doesn't exist yet, but you could have this tip-off or this showcase in Vegas where she plays, and it would make a whole lot of sense. Now, here's the thing. Hear me out on this. Here's the thing. She is the face of WNBA. She is the face of the WNBA. I understand we can get caught up in the Caitlin Clark hype, and I guess depending on how much stock you put into that, and to me, Asia Wilson is the face of the W. And with that being the case, anything she puts her name to gets magnified. I do believe it's on a comparative stance or stature as Chris Paul. I really do. Everything that she's done back-to-back championships with the Aces, MVP snub last year, looking like she's on an MVP run this year, right? Like you just look at her, Nike athlete. Everything is setting up for her as the face of the WNBA. The only thing that people want to say about it is they got this girl from college who had a huge moment in college, but this ain't even that show. This ain't even that show. But the point is, Asia Wilson is one of, if not the, and in my book, she is the face of the WNBA. You partner that with HBCU women's basketball, that's going to bring attention. I can guarantee you anything that Asia Wilson puts her name behind, specifically in the women's basketball sphere, is going to garner a a major amount of attention. That's how I feel about it, right? Her dad went to Benedict. I didn't know that. Her dad went to Benedict, and I believe that those roots, she didn't go to HBCUs. She didn't go to an HBCU. I don't hear her speak on HBCUs so much. I don't know what her relationship is with it. I know that Chris Paul has been a huge advocate for years. Prior to having this, I've been a fan of Chris Paul since he was with the New Orleans Hornets, though. So, like, I'm well aware of everything that he does. Like, I know the relationship with Winston-Salem. Like, I get it. I don't know what that relationship is like with her. I don't even know the relationship with her and her pops. I know that he put the basketball in her hand because I seen that quote. So I'm going to assume they have a decent relationship. She's still shouting out him for putting the ball in her hand. I don't know, though. But what I do know is that her dad went to Benedict, spent years at Benedict. Maybe those HBCU roots are deep enough for her to want to do this. I don't know, but I think that'd be nice. Once again, I'm not requiring it. I'm not demanding it. I'm not saying that she has an obligation or that this is what she should do. But I do believe that it would be nice if A'ja Wilson partnered with HBCU women's basketball. And I could argue that she is one of the best people to actually do it because of her stature and her roots. Y'all let me know what you think, though. Now, on Friday's episode, we'll be back with an episode about things I want to stop talking about. Like, these are conversations that I'm hearing and are a little bit redundant. Kind of exhausted about it. But let's get into that on Friday's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.